I made this video in 2020 during the coronavirus epidemic. I've always wanted to do this but have never felt I had the time before this forced isolation. Many people have expressed an interest in our volunteer work, which we have been doing for over 30 years. We absolutely love doing it and feel it has made our 3 children, Emily, Neil, and Matthew, better citizens of the world. I hope this gives at least a few people a good story in the midst of this onslaught of bad news. Please forgive my narration. It is much harder to do this than I thought it would be. I first traveled to Tanzania after college, spending 1 year studying wildlife biology in a master's program sponsored by the Rotary Foundation. In addition to classwork at the University of Dar es Salaam, we spent a lot of time traveling to the national parks studying the plants and animals. I had the opportunity to climb Mount Kilimanjaro and was successful, reaching the peak at over 19,000 feet high. My wife Suzanne and I spent the last few months of medical school during a rotation at Kilimanjaro Christian Medical Center. At this time, the hospital was extremely poor and the disease burden was tremendous. Many people came in with severe infectious diseases and very large tumors, and we had few means available to treat them. We had to reuse gloves as well as other equipment, including IVs. There was an ICU, however, basically this just meant that the patient was sick enough to need an IV. Sue and I, at this time, realized we would like to return at some point in the future to help if possible. Sue was anxious to summit Kilimanjaro, but unfortunately, she only made it as far as she is pointing due to mountain sickness. She was very frustrated and vowed to return at some point to try again. You can see that I had an early interest in bones. After residency, we took 3 months to work with orthopedics overseas, teaching in Indonesia. As in many developing countries at this time, traction was a mainstay of treatment for long bone fractures, as can be seen by this row of traction beds. The clinics do not have much privacy. People from the rural areas often had no care and came in with severe disease such as malunions of bones and infections such as this tuberculosis of the spine. They were still doing some drip ether anesthesia, which made everyone in the room woozy. They did not have very good implants, as can be seen in this forearm, and the complication rate, such as hardware failure, was high. We traveled with our children, Emily 3 and Neil 1. I often ended up carrying both of them, but thankfully Neil did learn to walk while in Indonesia. As in Africa, we saw some tremendous pathology, such as in this shoulder x-ray. This man had a chondrosarcoma of the proximal humerus and refused amputation of his arm. He came back a year later when the tumor had eroded through the nerves to his arm and he had no function. They were waiting for someone to arrive who could treat him. They asked if I had ever done or seen a 4-quarter amputation, and I said that I had read about it, so they put him on a schedule for the next day. Luckily, things went well, and I received Christmas cards for him for several years. Our next trip was to Bhutan, a small isolated kingdom in the Himalayas. I was the only orthopedic surgeon in the country and treated everything as well as teaching the general surgeons how to do orthopedics. It is a gorgeous country with wonderful people. Buddhism permeates the society. This child had osteomyelitis with the central part of the bone dead, floating in an abscess, and we had to remove that part of the bone and place him in a cast. Later that day, his mother had him outside drying the cast. The Buddhist monks had very poor nutrition and would often get a chronic infection called a tropical ulcer. These were best treated by improving their nutrition. For 10 days when I was there was no x-ray in the country, and a bus rolled down a mountainside with multiple injuries. They radioed us and said that they were coming as fast as possible and would be there in 24 hours. This was due to the mountainous roads. It was quite challenging operating on multiple fractures with only physical examination and no x-rays. People would often try to steal electricity and had severe burns such as this arm, which is essentially cooked. Most people cannot read, so they signed the consent form with their thumbprint. Note the fly in the upper left. The operating room was basic but functional. We returned to Bhutan a few years later, and our children went to school wearing the national dress. We were asked to be the guests at a mass cremation, including a recently passed away monk. It was fascinating, and it did not seem to bother our kids at all. We hiked often into the mountains to visit monasteries, and the young monks always loved posing with our kids. They had interesting decorations for their houses, and the penises were felt to keep away evil spirits. When we hiked into the mountains, we often ran into people who had never seen Caucasians before, and they were fascinated with our daughter's blue eyes. Most had never seen a camera and did not mind having their photos taken. Our next trip was to South Africa just after the end of apartheid. Our kids went to a mixed school. The orthopedic hospital was started by an orthopedics overseas volunteer who decided to stay there and was sponsored by his church in North Carolina. He was able to build a wonderful hospital with care which was very similar to that given in any developed country. It was wonderful to see such good treatment given to people who could not afford it. Unfortunately, we saw many of the same problems seen in other developing countries. In rural areas, doctors could still close the wounds of an open fracture, which should never happen with these contaminated wounds. There was a high risk of gangrene in these wounds, and we would try to get them to the operating room as soon as possible to place external fixtures. The operating room facilities were superb, including a C-arm to take fluoroscopic images. We used many external fixtures, and often in very unusual ways, such as this cross-leg flap to cover an open wound. We did many fixations of children's elbow fractures. This patient walked into the hospital after being hit by a car the night before, and we took him immediately to surgery to preserve his neurologic function. Sue was involved in the local tuberculosis hospital, which was very busy, and also worked with the orthopedic surgeon's wife in a clinic she had started at the dump, and our kids came along. In 2000, we volunteered in Vietnam, and we had a new addition, Matthew, who was 9 months old when we traveled there. He can be seen in the backpack behind me in this rickshaw. I did see an occasional war wound, such as this man who was shot in the forearm with a non-union of his radius. The equipment available to operate was similar to that in Indonesia, and we could generally manage. Although I would not consider getting on a motorcycle in the United States, it was an excellent means of transportation there. Note the lack of helmets and Matthew in the backpack behind me. There were many roundabouts, but luckily not many cars, and Sue would close her eyes as she went through roundabout and warn people she was coming. Matthew was a big hit, as seen here at China Beach, and our kids enjoyed the cultural aspects of Vietnam. Matthew enjoyed riding on a dragon, and the kids tried to imitate the poses of Buddhas. They were not too impressed with the food. However, they did like eating a cobra in a 5-course meal. We had to drink the blood, and I had to eat the heart while it was still beating. We returned to Tanzania in 2002 for the Orthopedics Overseas program in Western Tanzania. This was at the height of the AIDS epidemic, and the infection rate in the general population was 30%, 50% on the medical ward, and 70% on the tuberculosis ward. There was no AIDS treatment at this time. Luckily, since then, thanks to a program from President George Bush, everyone has access to antiretrovirals, and many people have been living with AIDS for more than 15 years. Our kids went to a Catholic school and were taught by nuns. They were somewhat shocked with the corporal punishment, although they did not have to experience it personally, as they were well behaved. Sue worked on the medical service. There was an orthopedic surgeon there, but he decided to take vacation when I came, so I was responsible for the entire service of 80 people. Luckily, there were good interns and assistant medical officer students. The clinic was fascinating. I do not know what this child thought of my facial hair. Emily helped me teach the assistant medical officers and is here demonstrating how to place a cast. The kids liked sleeping under the mosquito nets, and they made many friends at the school. However, they were not very good imitating flamingos at a local restaurant. We went on safari, and here we are using Matthew as lion bait. He did, however, discover that giraffes are afraid of him. In 2006, we spent 6 weeks in Ethiopia with a wonderful group of residents who were very anxious to learn. Matthew and Neil went to a local school, and Emily decided she would like to work in an orphanage. I think she envisioned working with the children, but instead was asked to rewrite their brochure, which had very poor English. I think she was invaluable doing this for them. Sue taught on the medical service. It was a very busy orthopedic department, and they treated all their elbow fractures in children with traction. I was able to bring equipment and teach them how to perform arthroscopy, and in this photo, we are doing the first arthroscopy ever done in Ethiopia. We were able to visit many cultural heritage sites and religious sites within Ethiopia. Here Matthew is seen with the fossilized bones of Lucy. The people are beautiful, and religion is extremely important to their society. On the weekends, we participated in the Hash House Harriers, which is like a British scavenger hunt. The first time people have to drink some beer at the end of the race, and you can see Matthew is somewhat reluctant. On the way back, we stopped in Egypt, and the family members have definitely improved their ability to pose as a statue. In 2008, I contacted Health Volunteers Overseas, which is the umbrella organization of orthopedics overseas. The Tanzania program had ended, and I asked if they might be interested in starting a program at Kilimanjaro Christian Medical Center, where Sue and I had been in 1985. KCMC is the tertiary referral hospital for northern Tanzania with about a 15 million population. There is a medical school and training programs for nursing, physical therapy, orthotics and prosthetics, as well as an orthopedics residency program. I felt it would be an ideal location for teaching. They agreed, and I contacted the orthopedics department to arrange a visit. Emily was in college and unable to accompany us. The mountain was as beautiful as I remembered, although it had less snow. The hospital had changed dramatically since 1985 with many new buildings and excellent groundkeepers. We were put up in a very comfortable house about a 10-minute walk from the hospital. We would generally cook our meals, getting vegetables at the local vendors. The walk to work was beautiful with a mountain in the distance. Morning rounds starts with a review of x-rays of the patients going to the operating room, new admissions, and post-operative x-rays. The pathology there is tremendous. Unfortunately, there are a large number of inexpensive motorcycles which people do not really know how to drive properly. There can be 8 to 10 open fractures admitted each day. After rounds, one goes either to the clinic, ward rounds, or the operating room. The clinic scene here has long waits, and for some of the people, the wait is just too long.
The clinic, each resident,
There is not much privacy in the clinic, but if needed for an exam, there is a curtain. There is ample pathology for teaching students and residents. The patients are wonderful, especially the children. Unfortunately, many fractures are treated by bone setters in the rural areas, and disasters such as this ischemic contracture are not uncommon. Osteomyelitis is prevalent. One thing I have never seen anywhere else is fluorosis, which is related to the high fluoride concentration in the water around Kilimanjaro. It causes this white bone. Tuberculosis is also common and can destroy joints. We also see internal fixation, which has been placed at other hospitals in suboptimal position. This often happens when there is no x-ray guidance in the operating room and the people are inexperienced using the equipment. There are many patients who come in months after shoulder dislocations, and the treatment for those is removal of the upper end of the humerus. For some reason, they have a lot of bone deformity in children, which can be treated very successfully with osteotomy, cutting, and straightening the bone. There are cast materials, but it is not of high quality, and they often do not have cast padding, so we have to use toilet paper. The casts often break down before the patients come back to the clinic. The best thing about the clinic is the minimal documentation, as seen in this clinic note, and it is a refreshing change from the extensive documentation required in the United States. The ward for orthopedics generally has a census of 80 to 100 patients. Traction is still used extensively for long bone fractures. Since I first started going there in 2008, this is less common. If the traction does not straighten out the bone effectively, then a short leg cast can be placed to control rotation. They have unique ways of preventing heel sores. One of the most frustrating problems I see is the spinal injuries with paralysis. These patients are put on traction for weeks or months. Understandably, depression, malnutrition, bed sores, and infections are common. We are now working on training the orthopedists to treat these people with internal fixation to allow rapid mobilization. There is a rehab unit for trying to get these people back into society. There is tremendous opportunity for teaching on ward rounds, even more so now that x-rays are digital and available on cell phones.
And their arms like this. And if you look at an AP x-ray, sometimes you can't see the posterior dislocation. But people with the posterior dislocation will have no external rotation. So from here, they'll stop.
Still looks really good.
So if we were to operate on that, at least if I were talking about, I'd go an answer approach for that. But that one, I don't think I would operate on that, no matter what. The dome looks so good.
This patient tried to unstick a plastic grinder with his foot. We encourage the residents to take photographs of the injuries in the emergency room as they come in, as seen in this cell phone image of a crocodile bite to the hand. There are many motor vehicle crashes that come in, and many of them are open, such as this humerus fracture with many shards of glass in the tissues. Unfortunately, this required an amputation due to nerve and artery injury. We put on many external fixtures for open fractures. We have sent them several hundred sets of external fixtures, and they do a great job with these. In 2008, they had a very poor orthopedic department as far as equipment was concerned, and the attending physicians and residents were very frustrated with the inability to treat patients the way they knew they should be treated. Over the last 12 years, we have improved this substantially. In 2008, we brought some power equipment which seemed well appreciated. We have also made sterilizable drill covers to be used over cordless power drills from a hardware store, which we supplied as well. I've been able to get Cindy's to donate a complete power drill and saw set, which has been a godsend for them. Hip fractures through the femoral neck have been one of the most difficult problems to treat here. These were treated with traction and rarely healed. We were able to obtain several hundred partial hip replacements, which has allowed these people to get up out of bed immediately and return to productive lives. Femoral shaft fractures had been treated with femoral nails, which were invented in the 1930s and had no ability to control rotation or length. Predictably, these often fail, as in this non-union. One of our friends, Lou Zirkel, has personally developed an intramedullary nail system which can control length and rotation and can be used without an intraoperative x-ray machine. Once the system has been donated to a hospital, all the rods and screws will be replaced for free as long as the patients are reported in the sign database. Sue and I donated one of these sign sets to KCMC. Here we are seen doing an open reduction and intramedullary nail fixation with the sign system. The knee is flexed at the end of the operation to get good motion.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, Mike.
I'm afraid I'll break the tibia. So I'm putting all my force on my fingers,
Yes.
not on my, see, I'm not
Not on
tight.
the ball.
I think that's probably enough.
Irrigation syringe.
So, Neil, why don't you
The patient can be full weight bearing immediately. This is the post-operative x-ray, and the hospital bus has a photograph of us doing this procedure on its window. We have also donated a pneumatic compression tourniquet to lessen blood loss doing extremity surgery. The operating room is fairly basic, having been built in the late 1960s. I frequently travel with a senior orthopedic resident from the United States who is assisting with this operation. Unfortunately, when this operation was done, they had used all their sign nails and had not reported them appropriately. Here they are doing another one of the older style nails. I have given them lectures about safe surgery and the checklist with a timeout, which includes patient's name, procedure, side, whether the patients have received antibiotics, etc. They are shown doing one of these here, and now they have developed their own checklist with "Thank you, good work" written in Swahili at the bottom. At this time, I made a contract and had each of the residents attest they would report the sign nails properly, and they have been quite good at doing it since, and we have replenished their nails.
Can you take a look at that? On that? Okay, drop that a little bit.
Here, it goes down here. Please.
Done.
About 4 years ago, I was able to obtain a fairly new fluoroscopy unit for the department. It has made a tremendous difference in their ability to treat patients properly. Next to the C-arm is seen an uninterruptible power supply to make sure the machine does not get fried by the variable electricity in Tanzania. We spent one Saturday afternoon going through proper use and maintenance of this very expensive machine. We were also able to send lead along to protect the staff.
Important when you finish with your use of the machine, turn the power button off first, then unplug it. Not the other way around.
And when you start it up?
When you start it up, you plug the two parts together, plug it in, and then hit the power button. And it takes about 3 or 4 minutes for it to warm up. So it might look like it's not working, but it takes some time for it to warm up. And then you can put the patient's information in, and then that information will be printed on the x-ray, the patient's information. So whatever the name is, what the procedure is that you want, the doctor that's doing it, all of that information will be on the printout.
And the image will be stored. The database.
Yes, I can show you. Let me show you.
Yeah.
We can now use this to fix fractures with less invasive techniques. When I was there last month, it was still running beautifully, and the people cared for it very well.
Good. X-ray. Not bad. So what I can do is I can try to put some traction on this now.
Okay.
And now, do an X-ray. Okay, you gotta slide the machine distal.
Can we do?
Yep. Go ahead, X-ray. Yeah, I can get a little bit. But that's okay, that's not much overlap. So I'll just hold it while you do the proximal squeeze. Okay?
Good.
The operating room now is very well stocked with the tourniquet, arthroscopy, electrocautery, fluoroscopy, and a new anesthesia machine from us. In the foreground is a fracture table we were able to obtain for them. This has helped in fixing many femur fractures. It was quite fun teaching them how to use it.
And this, once you get the feet attached, you take this off. And then these are just to adjust it. And the way I usually have these is I like to have it, this one straight. But you can put it any way you want. And lock this one, and then I can move it this way. And act like it's one piece. And then these slide. And then once you get it the position you want, you lock it there. And then we've got this in here. And then and this is usually, actually, when you're doing a right hip fracture, this is usually, excuse me, up like this. I'm going to be telling you. You see this? This needs to be around that. See that ring? That needs to be around this thing. This needs to be around this.
Okay.
Everything now I'm going to.
Slide, side to side, nice, huh?
Okay.
So now, you want to slide the C-arm in.
The first case we did with it was a revision of this non-union done elsewhere. We placed a sliding hip screw with excellent results as seen on these C-arm images. Sue enjoyed watching, and we all had tea afterwards in the break room. Dr. Mandari, who had visited us in the United States, has been particularly adept at using the C-arm. These x-rays are of a 16-year-old boy who was treated at 2 different hospitals in the capital city with a very poor result. His leg was malrotated and very short and weak. We did careful preoperative planning and used the C-arm to guide an osteotomy and refixation and realignment of this fracture. We were very satisfied with our results, and he is apparently back playing football again. They have had a difficult time getting good lighting in the operating room. However, the last time we were back, they were able to install a light we had sent them in our last container, and we are all quite happy to be able to see in the operating room without having to use a headlight. These are LED and should last forever. We have also gotten them a new anesthesia machine with monitors. One of the ongoing issues is the replenishment of used equipment. They have a lot of old screws from different manufacturers and different decades which do not work well together. We have been able to get a lot of excellent equipment, and much of our time at KCMC is spent there in organizing this equipment, especially the screws and plates. We have now sponsored an orthopedic tech to take care of the equipment, as we often returned and found it was in a poor state again, and we had to restock everything ourselves. We just brought this new tech a labeling machine, and he seems very enthusiastic about maintaining the equipment. I also push the residents to check all their equipment before it is sterilized to make sure it is complete for use in operations. They now have many thousands of screws and plates to restock the trays. These are about a third of the trays in the hall behind the operating room, ready to use. Note the labels above. My favorite aspect of volunteering is teaching the doctors in training. The more senior residents are generally very knowledgeable and up to date on orthopedic care. The first year residents, however, are often quite green, and I love to teach them before they have learned bad habits. Teaching can occur on x-ray rounds, on ward rounds, and in the operating room, and with didactic lectures and demonstrations. Here we have just finished an arthroscopy demonstration. I first taught people how to do arthroscopy about 10 years ago with a portable machine and a cow knee from the market. The equipment for arthroscopy we bought is quite old but very reliable. It is, however, difficult for them to get enough experience doing arthroscopies with all the trauma they have. I try to teach them on models each time I return, and this is just 1 month ago. Each afternoon at 3, we have a 1 or 2 hour teaching session for the residents. I generally give a PowerPoint lecture and then try to do some hands-on work. Like most orthopedists, they learn with their hands and their heads. The American residents have been invaluable teaching. In this picture, the doctor in the blue hat came with me from Chicago. He has since started his own orthopedics overseas program for hand surgery in Tanzania. There is a cadaver lab with a cadaver for the orthopedic residents, and here Dr. Shapiro, the chief resident from Stanford, is demonstrating approaches to the upper extremity. For demonstrations, we get trays from the operating room and operate on plastic bones. Here we are practicing proper technique for external fixators, hip fracture fixation, and forearm plating.
Usually,
it's not threaded here. Then it's threaded here. Actually,
So the reason you do that is so it doesn't get hot.
it's not threaded here.
See how much easier it is now when you pre-drilled it.
But you see
Isn't that a nice device?
my worst way.
So this- you don't have to-
There's an area where it's not threaded.
there's no question.
Each year, I go over proper sign nail technique and emphasize how important it is to report on these properly. In 2020, I overlapped for a few days with Dr. David Lowe from Massachusetts General Hospital, who was one of my teachers when I was in training. He brought along quite a few vacuum dressings for speeding healing of open wounds, and here we have our modification using local equipment to be able to reuse the pumps. We love to visit our former residents who are now in practice in Tanzania. We were on safari and were joined at lunch by Dr. Bellet, one of the former residents. When he visited us in the United States, we went to the Academy of Orthopedic Surgery meeting, and an article was written about him in the journal. Sam Kuwesa now runs a hospital doing tremendous orthopedic work, and he is well known throughout the country for the job he does. The American resident and I went to visit him and operated together for a day, and we're very impressed with the good work he is doing. Sue and I, for many years, worked at the International Medical Equipment Collaborative, or IMEC, which took donated medical equipment and refurbished it to send to developing countries. Sue was in charge of the program for Africa, and we were able to send 8 containers of medical equipment over the years to KCMC. Luckily, we have been able to obtain a lot of orthopedic equipment to send to them. They are the best equipped orthopedic department in the country, and other hospitals are quite jealous of them. Over the years, equipment has been donated to all departments of the hospital, including internal medicine, pediatrics, obstetrics, and anesthesia. An entire container was sent to supply the new emergency wing, and this included state-of-the-art equipment as seen here. Dr. Mandari was good enough to demonstrate the AKG machine, but chose not to test the defibrillator. The nurses were incredibly grateful for the equipment to be able to treat their patients properly.
Wow.
We really appreciate for this donation, especially these suction machines, and the monitors, ultrasound machines, ECG machine. We appreciate for it. So all equipment needed in emergency department, we've already received them and will be useful to our patients. So we thank you so much.
Thank
Asante
you.
sana.
Karibu.
Yeah.
We also sponsored a biomedical technician, Mark Heidenberg, to train the local technicians to maintain and repair the sophisticated medical equipment. They each received a toolkit as part of their training. Sue and IMEC were also involved in several local clinics in the area, and she can be seen at the grand opening of one of these in the Maasai area. IMEC closed in 2019, but we were able to send one last container full of ICU and orthopedic equipment. Fortunately, we were able to be there when it was unloaded. Emily and Neil's girlfriend Leah came along to help out. Emily has become an intensive care unit nurse and works at Portsmouth Hospital. Neil works in the biomedical field. We had a great time unloading the container and making sure everything was properly documented and went to the correct departments. Much of the equipment was stored to be brought out as needed. Emily was instrumental in getting the equipment to the intensive care unit. None of the nurses had ever seen a true ICU bed before.
Make sure they're not getting pressure sores. This one that it's doing now is a turn assist. So if a patient is laying flat, it will push the patient over and help you turn those so you don't have to hurt your back. And you can do that each way, left or right. So now it's going back to the middle. So that's if you're turning the patient to clean their back or to do a dressing change.
The kids also worked on putting all the ventilators together and making sure that they were still functioning after the trip. The anesthesiologists running the ICU were ecstatic with all the equipment they had to work with. This doctor almost had a heart attack, and he was so happy he is ready to defibrillate himself if that occurs. The orthopedic office was stacked full of equipment. The orthopedists were like children at Christmas with presents.
This can be for the distal tibia.
And this,
Those are if you want to attach ligaments, like if you had an MCL tear or something like that. And there's some small fragment plates and a plate bender.
and this is blender.
Yep. Although these ones, these calcaneus ones, you can bend with your fingers.
Ukipiga mtu
And then
x-ray hapa na hichi kidude lazima aanze ni foreign body.
Una foreign body.
Una foreign body. Thank you very much, IMEC and Dr. Crawford and Dr. Sue for this good stuff. So many people lives are going to be changed because there are a lot of poor people who cannot afford anything, especially they do suffer a lot of trauma, and then we don't have implants, and this will save us a lot
Now you have
for a lot of time,
Your
a
life.
long time actually. Yeah.
Well, you're very welcome.
Thank you
Karibu.
very much.
Dr. Maya, very welcome.
When we visited at this time, they had a lecture about the history of KCMC, and we were happy to be recognized. We are shown here with the administration of the hospital. We rarely travel to do volunteer work without adding some fun time during the trip. Northern Tanzania has some of the best wildlife areas in the world, and we have taken advantage of this several times, most recently in 2019 when our kids were there with us. I do not think these pictures need much narration and will spare you the sound of my voice while listening.
Na moyoni nimekubali kwa lolote utalojisikia, kumbuka yale walosema, na tuone sasa kama mwisho utafika. Kumbuka yale walosema, na tuone sasa kama mwisho utafika. Tabasamu unalonipatia, hilo ndilo linalonifikisha. Wabaya usiwasikilize, wana lengo la kusambaratisha, na mapenzi hayana muamana. Rekebisha unapofikiria, kumbuka yale walosema, na tuone sasa kama mwisho utafika. Kumbuka yale walosema, na tuone sasa kama mwisho utafika.
James Toto Adando Mwana Tope
Bogo Sukari na kipa kitu ustake mtoto wa Dandu, jina kubwa najulikana kama Nyerere, milele na milele ulimwenguni kote. Nikifa leo ama kesho ni wengi watalia kusikitika, mtoto katutoka, jina litabaki tena kwa haki kwenye makumbusho na vitabu vya kumbukumbu. Maswali mengi bila kupata majibu, walinisema sana bila aibu, kweli si uongo, kubeba jina mtoto wa Dandu si kazi ndogo. Mwana Tope
hasira za nini wewe Bwana, wataka kuniua bure Bwana, yule si wako nami si wangu, chukia nini kati yangu mimi na wewe? Nasema sina makosa,
man, come follow me. I'll be right here in Africa, yeah, Mandela. Monica and Angela, cut me on my cellar. Don't even wonder how will I be. Girls, they choose me, claiming that I'm a cutie. The end of 90s into the millennium. We're down.
We do have some favorite spots around Moshi where KCMC is located, especially to watch the sunset over Kilimanjaro. Usually the visiting residents are happy to join us and sample the different beers, although hopefully not all at the same time. The KCMC residents generally take us out to have some fun at the end of our trip, and here we are singing I Got Friends in Low Places at a local karaoke bar. There are several beautiful places to visit around the area, including this pool into which Sue is diving. There are some beautiful hikes in the area. Zanzibar is just off the coast and is an easy weekend trip. The sunsets and sunrises are gorgeous. It is a phenomenal place for diving, and the water can be unbelievably clear.
Mimi na wewe tuache makelele, mimi na wewe milele na milele. Goni ewa kuina twende mimi na wewe tuache makelele, mimi na wewe milele na milele. Mimi na wewe tuache makelele, mimi na wewe milele na milele. Tuwuliriza ngambo zaabwe bayonoona budde bwabwe, ebifa mu maka gaffe tebabimanyi wowe baswadde. Baleke boogere nnyo tebakulumya mutwabo, ensalo eyitiridde baagala ondeke wonze. Mimi na wewe tuache makelele, mimi na wewe milele na milele. Mimi na wewe tuache makelele, mimi na wewe milele na milele. Ani akulimba limba tinze nyina y'omulala, ebyono biyiye oh mbasekeredde. Baleke boogere nnyo tebakulumya mutwabo, ensalo eyitiridde.
In 2019, we traveled to South Africa with the family. It is one of the most beautiful places in the world, and they also have very good wine. They also have some unusual wildlife such as penguins, and the sunsets over Table Mountain with the fog spilling over are spectacular. This year we went to the Seychelles, 1,000 miles off the coast of East Africa, and did diving as well as some fishing, and afterwards had a romantic meal of fresh tuna carpaccio. Just across the border, in Kenya, are the Taita Hills. In the early 90s, we started a sister village relationship with one of the villages in the area. We first had some teacher exchanges, and we are seen here visiting those teachers and their families in 1996. We took them all on a safari, which was the first time they had ever seen many of the animals that live near them. Bura is a very picturesque but poor community. We have annual fundraising events to help with our projects. I returned to Bura a couple years after our first trip to be part of a State Department-sponsored HIV training. We recently had our 25th anniversary, and we made a video to commemorate this.
Imagine two communities, one in New England and one in Kenya. Although geographically far apart, they are connected as sister cities through friendship and love. In the 25-year partnership recognized by Sister Cities International, Newburyport, Massachusetts, and the rural village of Bura, Kenya have formed a strong bond. The Greater Newburyport-Bura Alliance has sponsored an abundance of programs in health, agriculture, and education for the benefit of both peoples. Exchanges of teachers, farmers, and community leaders has fostered friendship, cultural understanding, and mutual respect. Located in the Taita Hills of Kenya, the rural village of Bura is primarily a farming community. Running water and electricity are very sparse, cars are rare, and most locals must walk many miles to school or work. In 1992, the GNBA began a pen pal relationship with several members of the community. Bura is home to many orphans, and without support, many of these children go without schooling. In Kenya, primary school up to 8th grade can be free if the children have a uniform, a luxury that many are not awarded. For only $25, GNBA can supply a child with a uniform, a sweater, and a backpack to give them the chance to attend school. The instrumental help from coordinator Mary Calais has given the GNBA the opportunity to sponsor 400 orphans in Bura and allow them the chance to enroll in school. The program has since expanded beyond primary school children. The GNBA has supplied older children with continued education through secondary school, while also expanding those school facilities by sending technical equipment for the science laboratories. The GNBA has also started an e-learning program and supplied laptops for students at Bura Primary School so they can learn computer skills and have the ability to communicate abroad. Girls in the community have extra pressure to stay in school. In response to these pressures, the GNBA sponsored several symposiums, retreats, and programs specifically targeted to assist girls through the end of secondary school and even on to college. Many Bura locals used to have to walk 6 to 8 miles for medical care, but in 1994, a group of 10 volunteers from Newburyport went to Bura and began construction on medical assistance facilities in a remote area. Years later, the GNBA sent a 40-foot container of medical supplies to upgrade already existing facilities. The new Mwashuma Clinic officially opened in 2004. Since then, it has become so busy that there have been huge expansions added to assist in handling the increase in need. More equipment was sent in 2008 and again in 2015 to upgrade services in the clinic. New maternity and laboratory annexes have also been constructed. These services are beneficial for many, including women in need of C-sections who no longer need to be transported great distances to receive care. The GNBA has also sponsored an HIV/AIDS education exchange, where members of each community can share information so the peoples of the surrounding area can gain valuable teaching skills and share them with their villages. In 1997, the GNBA sponsored a farmer exchange where a local Bura farmer traveled to the United States and completed a 6-month internship in West Newbury, learning organic farming techniques and soil chemistry. The farmer then returned to Bura, where they provided seminars on the information they had learned to enrich the techniques of other farmers in the area. The farmer's vegetables have been a huge success, and he now supplies vegetables to local schools. Environmental conservation has also been a part of the GNBA's goals for Bura. Tree nurseries have been created by the Masito Orphan Group, and the Muungano Environment Group holds discussions to find ideal strategies for planting trees to prevent erosion and promote water conservation. We have supported these groups with supplying seedlings, tools, and educational visits. Along with Heifer International, GNBA was also able to supply cows and develop beekeeping practices to support sustainable development. In 2008, when the Crawford family was visiting Bura, their youngest son Matthew, who was 10 years old at the time, saw the local children were playing soccer with balls made of trash, plastic bags, and rubber bands. He also noticed that there were only boys participating in play. He returned to the U.S. and collected 60 soccer balls that were then sent with one of the containers of medical supplies to Bura. This began the first ever organized sports program for 300 children from 10 schools in the area. It was a program which promoted inclusion and offered girls the opportunity to participate in the games. The program then expanded to 420 children from 12 different schools. In 2014, GNBA introduced the One World Football, a ball made of material that is durable, does not deflate, and is sustainable even on the harsh fields in Africa. Children in the community have expanded their soccer abilities and have learned valuable skills, such as leadership and cooperation. The program has the whole community involved. Over the years, the two communities have forged a friendship and bond. Every volunteer has supplied their efforts and passion for supporting the people of Bura. The GNBA's programs rely on donations and volunteers. During the year, there are fundraisers including a lobster fest in July and an African dinner dance cultural night in October, as well as dinner meetings on the first Sunday of every month. The GNBA welcomes any interested people to become involved, so join, learn about life in rural Kenya, and meet all the wonderful people involved in this organization. The extensive support and care that the GNBA has put into helping the Bura community is what has made this 25-year-long relationship so successful. They are truly our brothers and sisters.
We continue to return to visit our Bura friends when we return to KCMC each year. Since the video was made, we have helped to start a beekeeping program and provided the soccer coaches with commemorative t-shirts and bags, in addition to resupplying them with balls, certificates, and trophies. They continue to celebrate with dancing and singing almost every time we are there. We are gratified we've been able to make a difference in this community. When I started this video, Sue was just failing her attempt to scale Kilimanjaro. This bothered her constantly from 1985 until our visit in 2008. It is one of the few things she has attempted in her life that she failed, at least according to her. When Matthew reached 10 years of age, which is the minimum, we decided to try again. Sue worked hard to get into shape, and we decided to take 6 days instead of the usual 5 to acclimatize. The hike is as beautiful as we remembered it. The hospitality of the guides was great, and our boys found some people to be friends with on the climb. As we got higher up, it got colder, but Sue maintained her determination. Matthew was pointing out either the summit of the mountain or the place where Sue failed previously. However, she was undaunted despite a cold snowfall. Matthew, however, did not appreciate snow down his back at 15,000 feet. At Sue's insistence, we woke up at 10 p.m. to begin our ascent instead of the normal 1 a.m. Look at those eyes. There is no way that this mountain will defeat her. For 7 long hours we struggled through the cold and darkness, ever up. As we neared the crater rim, the sun began to rise in the distance over the snow and cloud. It was breathtakingly beautiful, just like Sue. We trudged through the snow around the rim of the crater, gasping for breath, and knowing that our oxygen saturations were in the 70s, as we had brought an oxygen saturation monitor with us. Relentlessly, Sue continued to walk pole, slowly, knowing that victory was within reach. Finally, we had no more up to go, and the sign welcomed us to the top of the highest point in Africa and the largest volcano in the world. Success. And we even have the certificates to prove it. From the top, we could pick out KCMC in the distance, and it warmed our hearts to know that we had made a difference there.